Egalim. Now those are two places along the Dead Sea. Now, fishermen had no reason to stand along the Dead Sea, even today. That day they didn't have it. They don't have any reason to stand there today. You can float in the Dead Sea because there's so many minerals, so much salt. And it's not a place where fishermen are going to congregate to try to find fish. And what God is saying is that, listen, my river is going to touch the Dead Sea. A place that has never had life in it will have life. And not only that, it's going to draw up a community of people that live expecting life where previously there was only death to be found. Lifeless places will gather a community of people that not only experience the life that comes from this river, but expect it. They stand there and know that it's coming again. And there will be places for spreading nets. The nets for fishing back in those days were not nylon, permanent nets. No, these were biodegradable net. They would rot. So to keep them from rotting, you have to lay them out in flat places to dry so that you could fish today, dry them, fish tomorrow. What he's saying is that the blessing of God that is connected to his river will not only bring to a desolate death known for death place, life. It's not only going to bring life, it's going to bring life again and again and again. Matter of fact, you guys are going to have to do strategic planning to be able to choose places where you're going to dry out the nets so you can fish tomorrow, dry out the nets so you can fish the next day, because God is going to bless ongoing. It's just an amazing promise here for the river of God. And it says the fish will be like, go back here, the fish will be of many kinds like the fish of the great sea. Then comes verse 11, which I hope is I hope it'll touch you as it did me. I hope it'll spark your memory of how you have been thinking about God. But it says here in verse 11, it says, but the swamps and the marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. Now, I don't know about you, but if you were to consider the Dead Sea as an option, or let's say pretty much fresh water but swampy, muddy marsh as an option for life, and if you were to pick one of those that you were going to have to drink from or fish from, I think the chances logically would be more with the marsh than with the Dead Sea. And what God's doing once again is saying, listen, the river's going to flow and get deeper in the desert against all logic. It's going to flow and it's going to make the Dead Sea fresh. But what would seem logical, that something is half fresh water, like a marsh or like a pond, he says, I will have nothing to do with that. Matter of fact, the salt that's in the Dead Sea is going to be deposited in those. It'll be left for salt. And what he's saying is that, listen, independent source of life. Like, I thought about a couple of these areas. Jeremiah 2:13 talks about how my people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. And I started to think, what are broken cisterns, marshes, ponds like in my life? Things that God will have nothing to do with. He would rather go to the impossible place like a Dead Sea to restore that than go with the marshes. And what are they? Well, for one thing, my good works and my own goodness. Yeah, God has nothing He can do with that as far as my salvation. My own self-sufficiency. In Brazil, luck charms, we call them simpatias. People sometimes will come to church and come to know the Lord, but they'll bring with them some religious traditions where they have to do this type of ritual, have this kind of statue, and they want to follow God and that. And what God says is, listen, the half-sweet water, that is going to be on its own. That's left to itself. Matter of fact, the salt's going to be deposited in those places. But if you're in an impossible case, if you got no hope, that's where I want to go and change. And that's what I want to bring life to. Religion and ritual have nothing to do with that. But what will life be like if you allow the grace of God, the power of God's transforming river to flow through you, what can you expect? Well, he says here that fruit trees of all kinds grow on both banks of the river. Life from the river produces life. The kind of blessing, it's not that prosperity gospel kind of blessing where you say, hey, I'm going to write my check with God. He says, no, the kind of fruit that's popping up on the sides of this river is fruit that produces more fruit, life that produces life. Inside the fruit, there's seeds, and that kind of tree can reproduce, and more trees can pop up. And he's saying, you know what? Where I touch, not only if it's desolate, not if it's dead, life will be there. Community will be surrounding that whole previously hopeless situation, and they will be able to produce more life. And that's what God wants to do with Belgrade Baptist. He wants us to be able to be changed so we can be agents of change, to be blessed so we can be a blessing to other people. Their leaves will not wither, neither will their fruit fail. Weather is not going to mess up God's plan. He says, we're not going to miss the train. We're not going to miss the boat on this. He says their fruit will not fail. The idea of fruit failing, in Brazil, we got some orange trees and tangerine trees in the backyard. If you don't pick them at the right time, they start falling. A neighbor may come over and say, hey, está caindo de maduro. And what that is kind of a slam saying that, hey, your trees the fruit is falling because it's so mature, so ready. In other words, you're missing your opportunity. And what God's saying is, along the course of His river, you will not miss your opportunity. And coming to the United States for a year at this point, when the ministry in Brazil was beginning to become exponential, all the opportunities, the question comes to my mind, wait, are we going to miss the opportunity? Are we going to miss the boat? But if God leads us to be here now and minister here now and to be ministered to during this year, I know that along the river of God's grace in my life, I'm not going to miss opportunity if I'm living along the river. Every month they will bear because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Wonderful promise for us today when we're in a financial crisis. Will the impact of Belgrade Baptist be less because we are making less money? Will our ability to transform our culture here be less because we're in a crisis? Israel was in a terrible crisis. Matter of fact, they were slaves over in captivity. And that's when they received this text. What he's saying is that the blessing won't dwindle because the human resources got less. He says, every month they will bear because the water comes from the sanctuary. In other words, the source of our blessing is going to come from what God offers us through the sacrifice on the cross, not from something we can muster up that would eventually run out. We know that we can be a blessing to this community because our blessing comes from the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. It says, and the fruit will serve for food and the leaves for healing. God will sustain and God will heal us.